Student 23, great. So let's get started. Let me just share the slide deck and do some intros. And can everybody see the there? Can everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. You made it. This is the final class. Although we've got a lot to do today, and I know you prepared really hard for this. So this is. I had a professor once when I was in graduate school that said, "We're not calling these tests anymore. We're calling them demonstration exercises." So I sort of like that. Put a positive turn on it. And so this is the agenda we have. It's pretty full, as you can see. So we have 6 teams. And this is the random order we picked last week. So we'll go with 3 teams, team 4, 3, and 6. We'll take a break, get up and stretch, and then do teams 1, 5, and 2. Take another break, and the judges will be going to a breakout room for deliberations and discussions. And during that time, I'll also give a brief course retrospective, and we should be able to wrap up early. For those of you that are able to join us, we have a virtual happy hour set up for 8:30, but it's strictly bring your own. So, since I would normally look forward to buying around for everybody, but that doesn't seem possible in a virtual environment. So you'll have to take a rain check on that. So in terms of introductions, I'd like to introduce our panel who's on now. Vicki Barrow-Klein, CFO at Planned Parenthood Federation. And Vicki, are you based in New York or elsewhere? You're on mute. You're on mute. There, I just unmuted.
Sorry. So I recently relocated to Washington, D.C. So we have 2 main offices, and the second one is in Washington, D.C. Our advocacy office is here.
Great. And Tom Shafnit is former president of A2 Technology and doing work globally with some of the network standards for autonomous vehicles and other assorted things. And Mark Banbury, who's executive director of IT, actually interim director of IT at the College of Family Physicians in Canada. Still in Toronto though, Mark, yeah?
Indeed, still in Toronto, right across from Toronto Pearson Airport.
Okay. And then Kevin McRitchie, CEO of Helios, and other positions. If we can convince Kevin to join us on the happy hour, he can tell you about some of the other roles he's playing. Kevin, as I mentioned earlier, is driving in Nebraska in a blizzard, but has a solid connection. So since he used to work at Cisco as a vice president, we expect his connections to always be stellar. So welcome to our panel. So again, this is the order of presentations. These are team names that each of the teams picked, and first names of the people on the teams. And so we should be ready to go. Let me just, this is just a reference slide, mostly for the senior management team panel. It's also in some documents I sent you. Again, just who's on each team, who their mentor was, some of these people you know. And then the company, an abbreviation for the company, either real or fictitious. And then what scenario the team has chosen, although they varied the scenarios, and you may pick that up in the problem statements and the introductions, and that was perfectly acceptable. So the rules for today, we did random selections, as I mentioned. Each judge has a copy of the slide decks and the reports, and a score sheet template that we'll be using. The written reports can be referred to as for a footnote during the presentation, particularly if there's a question asked that isn't covered in the slide deck but is in the report. Not that we'll all turn to that page in the report, but you can refer the panel to the report for the detail for the question they're asking. Each team has had the option of choosing whether they want 1, 2, 3, or 4 to present. I think everybody has chosen 4, so we'll hear from each member of the team. They've limited the slides to 10 slides of content. That's excluding a title and a footer slide. 10 minutes, then with 5 minutes for Q&A. So this is really a lightning round, which is itself a challenge. I'll be the moderator, so I'll start a timer going as I did during the practice presentations, and then I'll hold up 2 fingers for a 2-minute warning to let you know when you're within 2 minutes of the end, and then we go into the Q&A time. With a 5-minute Q&A, we may not get a chance to have a question and answer from each one of the panelists, so we'll rotate the questions then between presentations. 5 minutes between for setup. We'll take a break, as I said, midway, and then we'll take a break at the end of the 6 while the judges deliberate, and the judges will be scoring all the teams and also selecting best presentations, which I mentioned last week. And blizzards notwithstanding, we'll hopefully have the ranking and the scoring done by the end of tomorrow. That's subject to change. And then we're rating presentations on a 100-point scale, and then we'll normalize those for the greater number of points that are part of this part of the assignments. There's 3 possible outcomes: that your proposal's approved, you celebrate, then you're done. You don't have any further work to do. Outcome number 2 is your proposal's approved, but you've got between 1 and 3 contingencies that the panel would like you to address. And then the third is your proposal's not approved and you need more than 3 things changed. As I said, we'll try to post those results by the end of Friday. If you have a outcome for your team of number 2 or number 3, then you have until midnight Monday on the 20th to resubmit your slide deck and supporting reports with those contingencies addressed. Again, as on any resubmits, to then just highlight what you've changed. You do not need to represent. So this is the sole presentation that you'll do. And then for Zoom, I think everybody knows these things, but it's always worth repeating again. One member of the team will be driving and advancing the slides and then therefore sharing their desktop and in presentation mode. All the team members, though, should be on video and unmuted for the entire session, including the presentation and then the Q&A session. At the end of that time, unshare your desktop, and then we'll return to muted audio so that the next team sets up and goes on audio and video. Tech backup, as we talked about last time, is a good idea. I've got my mobile phone ready to be tethered if for some reason we lose internet connection. And I recommend that you consider the same. And then there was a bunch of tips that were included in the practice session feedback doc. There's a link to it if you want to hop and review some of those. So before we start, any questions either from the panel or from class members?
Nope.
Okay. So we'll go with team 4. Let me add the capability of.
I'm doing it. This is Ho-Jun speaking.
Okay, but I think I need to stop sharing to do that. Hold on, there we go. And then I need to add multiple participants. Okay, you should be able to share now, Ho-Jun.
Share screen. All right, are you guys all getting the slide and my voice?
Yep.
Yes, that's all working. And why don't you give me a second here? We'll just start the timer, and you go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, and thank you for being here today. Before we begin, we'd like to let you know that we are operating under the following assumptions for this presentation. First of all, you as the S&T panel are acting as the executive board of our client, and you have decided that the organization needs to better leverage technology. And secondly, the organization has ongoing partnerships with 3 universities in Michigan. This provides an abundant pool of talented students to carry out implementation of the IT strategy we will be presenting on today, and student teams will be supervised by 1 current full-time staff member of our client. So we are Solve IT, a student consulting group at the University of Michigan, and we provide volunteer consulting services to nonprofit organizations throughout our community. My name is Rochelle Mady, and I'm the program manager.
I'm Nick Karastis. I'm the financial officer.
Hello, I'm Benjamin Sutton, and I'm the IT solutions lead.
And I'm Ho-Jun Kim. I'm operations lead.
And as you know, World Medical Relief is a nonprofit organization that's based in Southfield, Michigan, that aims to redistribute surplus medical supplies to those in need, both locally and globally. Our research methodology for this project included key informant interviews with volunteers and staff members of World Medical Relief, as well as observational studies on site of their day-to-day operations. And what we found is that while World Medical Relief has experienced rapid growth in recent years, manual management processes slowed down their overall operations and core business functions. So the organization still relies very heavily on handwritten records and manually transcribes records to Excel, and this slows down the efficiency of volunteer, donor, and inventory management. And so we know that digitization is crucial for the future of World Medical Relief, and as consultants, our job is to assess the current status of the organization and provide an IT strategy that will serve as a roadmap to World Medical Relief as they accept and implement modern IT infrastructure. And the goal of implementing this IT strategy is that it will help them improve volunteer experiences by enhancing volunteer and donor information management systems for their relief goods, as well as develop a public record of their inventory that will help allow for more accurate assessment of their needs, as well as funding requests that are based upon those needs.
So for the formation of our strategy, we have looked at the core business functions of the organization, such as inventory management and volunteer management. We tried to identify the issues within those functions, some highlights being inaccurate information and manual processes. This led us to create a strategy for World Medical Relief to transform organizational processes from analog to digital to enhance the efficiency of the core organizational functions in a way that is affordable, stable, and future-proof. We have looked at multiple options for potential solution to implement our strategy, and we'll be discussing 2 of the options we have discovered. One option is based on Microsoft Azure using Microsoft 365, and the other is web-based completed packages called CIN7 and Volunteer Hub. Before we go into our solution, let's take a closer look at the operational challenges. We analyzed different core business functions where there was a need for improvement and how those subpar processes were impacting the performance. For inventory management, some highlights include manual inventory logging, which caused lack of real-time inventory information. For volunteer management, analog sign-up processes caused long delay before the information was available for follow-up actions, and some of the information was in fact inaccurate. For marketing, due to lack of structure in how they deal with the information of the volunteers, their marketing campaign was undermined with underwhelming response. Further details and analysis can be found in the supporting report under operational analysis section. With that said, we'll continue on to the introduction of our potential solutions.
Hello. For option A, we looked at a ground-up approach using Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365, which offers both an infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. For option B, we looked at using CIN7 and Volunteer Hub, which is just a platform as a service. Using those 2 things, option A goes with Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365 nonprofit, operating both of those things on Apple iPads and PCs for the volunteers and for the the full-time staff members. For option B, Cint7 and Volunteer Hub are both internet services all seen and used on the internet and downloaded through the use of different login screens and stuff, not downloaded onto computers. Cint7 is our inventory management system, which will help World Medical Relief with tracking and use of the distribution of their supplies. And Volunteer Hub offers them as a use to track the hours and kiosks for all of their volunteers, which will help them stay digital. Both of those can be operated on Apple iPads and PCs.
Getting into the benefits, risks, and mitigations associated with each option, you can see starting with option A in this matrix, the benefits are that the solution is immediately cost effective for the organization, and that'll be hammered home in the next slide and in the supporting report. And with that, the option is highly scalable. So as the organization grows, the solution will continue to be cost effective for the organization. And it's also customizable. So the organization, World Medical Relief, only pays for the services which they need. However, there are some risks associated with this option. There is a level of platform expertise that's needed, and it does require continuous management. And with that, we believe that there is a slower implementation of the solution, but we believe that those risks can be mitigated through TechSoup consultations, the continued support of our team, and leveraging the connections that World Medical Relief has with the state-funded universities here in Michigan. And briefly with option B, the benefits are that there's no technical staff required. And with that, we think that the solution would be somewhat easier and quicker to implement. However, the risks outweigh these limited benefits. There's a significantly increased cost, which again is highlighted on the next slide and in the supporting report. And there's also predetermined IT features that World Medical Relief will be forced to pay for and maybe wouldn't necessarily need or use. And option B, it will be more expensive as the organization grows. Yeah, so as I previously mentioned, you can see in this matrix at the bottom of the slide, the cost breakdown for each option. The first year cost is immediately cheaper by $5,000, and going forward, the annual renewal cost, which includes licenses and maintenance costs associated with each option, is also lower. So that total figure, that 3-year figure, is significantly lower going with option B. And getting into some of those expenses, you can see that in the supporting report, or excuse me, the supporting budget. But there are some universal items like iPads and kiosks, staff training, and volunteer alignment efforts, improved networking equipment, and then the costs associated with each option solution. So Azure and the off-the-shelf systems that we mentioned. In terms of funding strategies, outside of the funding we are requesting from the board of World Medical Relief, we also are going to leverage connections to get tech donations from TechSoup and the Ford Foundation. And we also plan on applying for external grants through Microsoft, the Walton and Pfizer foundations as well.
So we've developed a 3-year IT strategy to be implemented between the years 2020 and 2023. And in an effort to reduce project milestones, each year is actually broken down into quarterly phases as opposed to monthly phases, which can be found in detail in the supporting report document. We've highlighted key components of each phase here, where all required equipment is identified and sourced in phase 1 of the IT strategy. Phase 2 will consist of successfully implementing the solution. And although the digital skill set of World Medical Relief's volunteer base can vary and can be limited for some volunteers, we've identified a willingness to learn the technology. And so a key component of phase 2 actually involves training volunteers to successfully understand and use the technology implemented. And then phase 3 is focused on continued data collection to generate a data analytics pipeline for assessing and improving the technical aspects of services moving forward.
So for our recommendation, first of all, I want to thank you all very much for listening to us and allowing us to work on this digital strategy. And it's been a pleasure to work with the company as World Medical Relief, as we all know, is as important now as ever. The primary recommendation from our team is the option A for your IT digitization strategy, implementing Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365 as best suited for your needs. These needs are because of cost effectiveness, the flexibility of the platform, and how incrementally you can implement the platform as you need and as you see fit, as you grow and change with the changing times. We request that World Medical Relief adopt this as the primary option A for the strategy. Thank you very much for your time, and it has been a pleasure of Solve IT.
Okay, right on time. Let me open it up for questions and from the panel, who would like to start off?
I'll take a shot at it. Thanks. It's Tom. Yeah. I just wondered whether you guys had considered the resources that will be needed to train volunteers to take over the network management and so on with the proposed solution. I know you covered that in general, but I didn't know whether you'd gone into detail if people would have to be sent to training courses or these are all online and what the cost for those would be. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that a bit. So we do have specific certifications laid out for Microsoft Azure systems, and there's trainings through Microsoft that are provided on site. So granted, the situation right now is a little hectic, and I don't think that's possible, but for our multi-year plan, that is something that we could get the staff at World Medical Relief trained up on.
That's actually one of the great things about Microsoft Azure is you don't need to know the entire platform all at once. You can get trained up on different sections, just the data storage, just the platform, just the application development, and it can really grow with who is the expert at the time. As more people learn the platform, more people can become trained up on it as you lose and gain different volunteers with different skill sets.
Thank you.
Ed, it's Mark. Can I take the next one?
Please, go ahead.
So I thank you guys for the presentation. Wanted to comment, very nice that you kept the branding behind you there as well with the PowerPoints. Nice touch. And I'm sure if your other classmates haven't done that, they're all scrambling to come up with a background right now. My question for you is, the second option was really a software, platform as a service, where you were looking at two products that were cloud delivered, the Sin7 and the Volunteer Hub. And in your first option, you're really looking at Azure and the 365 not-for-profit. What specific applications are you looking for in the 365 not-for-profit suite? Because there are tons of them that are available to you there. Do you have specific recommendations on Microsoft Cloud software you want to implement?
Yeah, this is Hojin. I can answer to that question. So we wanted to go with Microsoft 365 because Excel's included in it, and because the full-time staff of the organization are not really comfortable with cloud-based system or any modern technology at the moment. Before we get them up to speed, we would like to start with Microsoft Excel, because currently what they happen to do is they write every volunteer, if volunteer comes in, they write their information on paper, and basically the clerk, the full-time employment clerk, transcribe that to Excel. So just by implementing a kiosk system with an iPad that's connected to our Excel file where we put our volunteer information, that basically takes care of that one unnecessarily manual process. So we are going to start off with Excel, but as we get comfortable with the most fundamental and basic functions of Microsoft Azure-based programs, we can then design a database, SQL database that will store inventory information as well as volunteer information. And we can create functions that can automatically generate reports when there's a low inventory, and as well as if you want to go on an outreach campaign to your pool of volunteers, you can generate that on the system base as well. But
Okay.
our plan is to start off with the most fundamental basic functions such as Excel.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you, Ho-Jin.
Okay, we have time for just one more question.
All right, may I take that, Ed?
Go ahead, Vicki.
Thank you.
You're
So,
so fast, Mickey.
I got you, Kevin. Just quickly, yeah, expected, it's going to be a finance question. In your mitigating strategies between the two options, I'm noticing that the cost to adopt is probably lower with option B in terms of technical staff required, and I'm looking at the mitigations and it involves a lot of consultants. So I'm wondering, I know you did the hard costs of the transition. Did you evaluate any of the soft, the people costs?
Yeah, me and Nick can answer that question. So basically, World Medical Relief currently has a partnership with our university, Wayne State University, as well as University in Kalamazoo. And basically, in all of those universities, they have a student organization dedicated solely to volunteering at this organization. So up to this point, a lot of the volunteer base at those student organizations has been pre-med students because they have to classify different kind of donated medical equipment as well as medicines. But we can take that into a different path where we can recruit more tech-based students into that student organization. We can continuously provide support for the organization at a minimum cost. So it's going to be volunteer work, but we're just going to change the nature of it from, medicine-based to a technical-based. And I'm sure we could find enough students to help out the organization with the overall implementation of the strategy.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that quick, TechSoup does a great job of providing resources and consulting to nonprofits, and that's something we plan to leverage heavily. And the employees at World Medical Relief are really committed to their work. So if we offer the training, they stated clearly that they would be willing to learn and put in the time to master the system and make it work for the organization.
Yeah, and while talking to their financial officer at the office, he just said we do not have enough money to just purchase all-in-one solution outright. So we tried to look for options that could be pro bono work or at least some kind of pathway for them to leverage. So external grants, current partnerships they have, and they have a very active relationship with Ford Corporation where employees of Ford come in for volunteering, both in terms of IT related or manual labor. So we try to expand on those current existing pro bono options as much as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, good job. Let's, if you would unshare your screen, and if team 3 would set up.
Thank you.
I want to say, I'm sorry, Kevin, you didn't get a dance from us this time either. I want to apologize to that.
Well, you mean yet is what you're trying to say. So certainly that would be part of your presentation.
Well, I'm just assuming you're still wearing those awesome boots that you always have on.
And you are always assuming correctly.
All right.
Good to you, Kevin.
Who's driving the slides for Team Days? Dylan, are you in the driver's seat?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Let me know if you can see my screen. It just started sharing.
Yeah, you're not in presentation mode yet, but yes, we can see the screen.
Awesome. Perfect.
There. Can everybody see now the title screen for Team Days? Okay, we're
Yes.
good to go.
Awesome.
So let me know when you're ready to start, and I'll start the timer.
Great. I think Sanjana is kicking it off.
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead, Sandra.
All right, so I'll go. Hello, everyone. We're at Team Days, and I'm Sanjana. We've got Becky, Adrienne, Dylan on our team, and our mentor is John Blair.
So we play the role of an internal consulting team at an international cosmetics distribution company, and we were consulted by the head of IT to help make major decisions for the company's future. I am the IT product engineer.
I'm Adrienne Royce. I'm the Vice President for IT Security and Risk.
I am Becky Penn. I'm the Industrial Scientist.
And I'm Dylan Kennedy, and I'm a Finance Director.
So to begin with, our problem deals with helping the company to migrate to a single processing and supply chain system in order to unify and standardize supply chain management processes across 11 companies in the least disruptive and most impactful way. So we've got the CEO on one side and the CFO on the other. The CEO wants to integrate processing by introducing an enterprise resource planning system to create one IT. And the CFO instead wants to stick to a surefire way by using the best of breeds approach to stay risk-free. So the question is, how does the head of IT deal with this?
Taking a look, as Sanjay mentioned, taking a look at how the overall business is, our overall goal as a business, we're trying to merge 11 systems that we will be acquiring by the end of the year. And how does that look in terms of our warehousing and distribution? And what we really want to accomplish is having a one IT solution for specifically, again, the warehouse and distribution, so that we can get products out from our factories and into shelves as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And we want to do that with as little disruption to the business overall. And that means that we want to keep the leadership, still in New York where our headquarters are, still operating in India where we're currently operating, but also as a cost-saving measure. And this will be applicable across all of our regions and affecting about 3,000 workers, but mainly within the IT and the warehousing space. And so there will be some trickle-down effect towards the sales and obviously the engineering part of it as well. But mainly those are the folks that are going to be impacted at this point, because we're focused on making sure that our overall business of getting these products out into the shelves are being prioritized at this point.
Well, to better understand the industry landscape and generate a realistic and effective proposal, we studied the industry leader of the cosmetic distribution company, Estee Lauder, and many vendors in the supply chain ERP field. Looking at Estee Lauder's annual report, we evaluated the size and unique technology needs of a cosmetic distribution company with consideration of our unique business structure, IT strategy, risk factors, and many results of operations. To mimic the success and learn from the obstacles, we also researched on Estee Lauder's 7-year SAP project. We focused on understanding how they established their project timeline, milestones, success measurements, resource planning, and ROI. Additionally, an ERP vendor portfolio is compiled to better understand the logistics surrounding ERP implementations in terms of comparing their features and services in deciding which system best suits with our needs.
Some of the options that we consider for the ERP system after investigating a list of top ERP, SAP, Oracle, Acumatica, and Microsoft Dynamics 365. We considered various features of each product, including price, services, ease of implementation, and their clients, and we chose to recommend SAP because we found that it was widely opted in its features and services such as cloud-based solutions, resource and supply planning, sales and operations planning, maintenance and support were better than the rest.
So what benefits will implementing a SAP ERP system bring us? First, it will replace different legacy processing systems across our global markets into a standardized user-friendly system. The system will help us achieve increased processing efficiency and reduced training time. Most importantly, it will help us eliminate the data silo situation. The previous scattered data will now be collected and processed into a useful format and context. More accurate data available to more people at any time from the ERP data system will help other departments to make business decisions. We're aiming to reach increased revenue in year 3, and will happen in the form of building a more efficient operations environment to save costs and lower inventory.
So we've developed a 5-phase timeline. The first phase will take 6 months. It's our planning and design phase, where we'll identify our goals, interview our stakeholders, create our information architecture models and diagrams, as well as document our subsidiary practices. Then in phase 2, we'll contact our implementation vendors, schedule demonstrations, and then finalize our overall process plan with the selected company. In phase 3, we'll install and configure the system and identify a beta project where we will then train the users and evaluate both systems by running them in parallel for 1 fiscal quarter. In phase 4, it will be a full system rollout with a migration plan for all 10 companies. And once again, we'll do the parallel processing of both systems. And then finally, once everything is up and running, we'll establish the IT maintenance schedule, as well as information governance and the records retention schedule. And then this table shows how we're going to address the tactical risks. So key will be to assure that we are able to continue our operation and supply chains. But we've also taken into consideration the stakeholder alignment, as well as maintaining control in our project development, assuring we have a handle on the project complexity, developing our in-house skills, assuring cybersecurity issues, particularly with acquiring the European Union Safe Harbor certification for data transfer. And then we want to assure our relationships with our customers and suppliers. So we want to communicate with them clearly, as well as getting their input as stakeholders from the very beginning.
So what we're asking for today for you guys to consider is an upfront cost of about $204 million over the 7-year project that we're currently projecting. And that $204 million is about 2% of the share of revenue, which is actually standard within the cosmetic industry. Most companies right now that are market leaders, they're dedicating about 2% of their annual revenue towards their IT strategy. And so $204 million is right in line with the industry standard. And that is more of an upfront cost. So about 75% of the cost of this project will go towards upfront costs like the infrastructure setting up, all the external consultants, all of the opportunity costs that are associated in terms of the internal resources that we will be dedicating. We are asking for about 5 internal candidates to focus specifically on this project for the next 7 years to really ensure that it's being executed and communicated seamlessly and thoroughly throughout the entire process to make sure that it's running smoothly. And what we're expecting out of that $204 million investment is about a 7% incremental revenue growth annually, year over year. We are seeing that same around that same standard for SD Lauder's 7-year project, and we project to be on the same line as them, given kind of the execution that we are planning on going forward with. And in the other terms of ROI, we're seeing that in about the next 5 years, we're going to see, once we have the initial costs spent on the infrastructure, the consultants, and all of those things, a decrease in the licensing, the system maintenance, the IT staffing, and even transactions. Because what that will mean is that instead of going from 50 legacy order process systems across 11 different companies, we're now going to be consolidating into one IT service with one vendor relationship that we will be managing, and that will then reduce the cost. Instead of spending that 11 times over, we will be doing that once. And all of the folks that we intend to acquire that are specifically dedicated to that project will slowly migrate into other more daily roles that are outside of that project once their tenure during the 7-year project is over. And so that's where we're going to see a lot of the cost decrease throughout that time period. Do you guys have any questions?
All right, Kevin, why don't you lead this off, since we didn't have time for you to ask a question last time.
No, perfect. Thank you. So first off, very nice job, ladies. Very well thought out. And let me focus in on 1 or 2 areas. So a caution that I would like to provide before I ask my question, and that is, always be careful when you are considering the people on a team and that you're saying you're going to reduce costs, but then the people will migrate into other areas. You have to be able, at least in my mind, be able to show where those costs are going to be reduced. If you're showing the elimination of people in this project, but you're going to carry them somewhere else, doesn't mean you're going to reduce those costs for the company. So I'd be really careful when you say those kinds of things, that you can identify where the costs are going to end up in the company and that they're still going to reduce. So that's just a caution. But my question really centers around the metrics. So you talked about you're going to compare and watch and monitor old system, new system. And so I'm very interested on what some of your metrics would be. Early in the presentation, you commented on reducing the timeline from manufacturing to get it to maybe store shelves, if I remember right. But are you also looking at the cost to do so? Reducing those costs, is there a way to generate some increased profitability around that? What are some of the other metrics that you're looking at that, beyond changing the system and theoretically making it easier, that are going to have a positive impact to the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is in the operation costs, right? Right now, we're looking to acquire about 11 different companies in the next year. And so that means that there's 11 different headquarters, 11 different factories. And so the idea is really about consolidating our operating costs. So that's a big factor in terms of what our measurement is. And then the other component to that is how much we're going to see once we've consolidated all the operation costs and the cost also of offloading all of those, what that means in terms of our revenue. So what we actually saw in the Estee Lauder ERP case study was they were actually seeing an annual increase in terms of their overall revenue with the products that were part of the ERP process changes, and they saw an increase in revenue there, which could be directly attributed to the fact that they were able to get each product out to market faster and actually less transaction costs between getting that from their factory all the way shipping to a store. And so we're going to be operating off that same model. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I had a couple questions, if I may. Along your timeline, where is your break-even point? Like, how long does it take to recoup that investment?
Sure, yeah. We're projecting to break even around the 5-year mark. That's generally pretty average for a lot of the IT ERP projects that we've discussed with John. 5 years seems to be sort of the sweet spot of when we start to see some changes there. But we do expect the full return on investment by the 7-year mark.
So, okay. And the other question is, you talked about running parallel operations for 1 quarter. Are you sure that's long enough to be able to validate the new system?
Sorry, do you want to take that, Adrian, or?
Yeah, you talked about running the old system and the new system in parallel for 1 quarter at the junction of those two. And I was just wondering whether that 1 quarter was long enough to run them in parallel in order to validate that the new system is doing everything it needs to do.
Well, I certainly think it'll be a start. It'll help capture any major errors. Certainly once the beta has run that 1 quarter and we're implementing the full scale configurations, we'll still be continuing to monitor the beta project so that if something does come up, hopefully we can, we'll be able to catch it before everything is up and running.
Yeah, and just jumping on that, I think the goal here, and this is from sort of some of the conversations we've had with John as well, is the idea is, to get that beta out for a quarter, but the entire process, we want to loop in internal stakeholders a lot sooner so that there's constantly an iterative process where we're constantly improving upon the model, making sure that the feedback and we're still on the right goal, we're still on the right track there. And so even though we will be testing formally for 1 quarter, if we have to go back to the drawing board, it'll be another quarter of just like cleaning up all these issues and then testing it out there. And there's always going to be a lot of people being onboarded and trained on that. And so the idea is that it's 1 quarter, but it's, very likely, as a lot of these things go, a lot of timelines get stretched out. And so that's something that we're considering as well.
Thank you.
Ed, it's Mark. Is there time for one more?
Yes, Mark, go right ahead.
All right. If you go back to your slide on options and recommendations, You had the final box on that one being training and adoption, which really sits around change management in these large projects. And it's one of the things that can sync the project quicker than any other piece in implementing something as big as potentially as SAP. And as Ed knows, I implemented SAP in 70 countries around the world for not-for-profit. And it is challenging. Now, you mentioned the only one that doesn't have a check mark there is the training and adoption, and it's because of a lengthy learning curve. How do you envision actually squeezing down that learning curve and getting those users to accept it and to use the new system?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we considered, especially as we're thinking about the 11 different cultures, right, that we will be acquiring by the end of the year. And so that's why to us, it's really important and central to our plan that we have internal stakeholders that are solely focused on the project. And those leaders will be passing it on, you know, as they're going to effectively be the culture champions, right, of this new change. And what we want to make sure is that throughout the process, they're not, you know, they're leading, but they're not the sole voice of it. They're going to be the conduit that kind of brings other voices within their particular departments, so that we get their feedback. And also there's an open channel of communication that's a little bit more direct than just, you know, a top-down approach. There's some bottom-up approach there as well. And that's a big part of how we think that the learning curve is going to be lessened over time, because if you have these internal champions and these communications constantly happening throughout the process, and again, with the beta testing and making sure that, you know, each iteration of that beta test, we have, you know, real power users doing that we can effectively get the formal training to everyone else a lot faster, because they already have peers that are both really, you know, well-versed in the product and also likely, you know, very passionate and hopeful about this new solution.
Great. Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, good job. If you would unshare your screen, and if we could get team number 6, Tech Alley, to set up. And who's driving?
I am.
Maheen. Okay, great.
Can you guys see the screen?
We can see your PowerPoint app now, and now you're in presentation mode. Okay.
Thank you, Ed.
Everybody else good?
Yes.
Okay. Are you? Let me know when you're ready to go.
Okay. I'll be the first one.
Okay,
Welcome
go ahead.
everyone to the Tech Ally. And before we start, I'd like to make it clear that we're presenting as if you are our company's internal leadership. Next slide, please. Okay. Here shows the positions each of us will take pending approval for this project. Especially want to thank Patrick here, our executive sponsor, who was essential to the creation of this proposal. And next, please. Just to keep everyone on the same page, Tech Ally is a developer of a widely used electronic health record system for medical documents and data. We're ranking 5th in this market now, and we operate and headquartered in US. There are approximately 4,600 employees and making a revenue of $1.4 billion per year. Our customers are mainly mid to large size hospitals all over the country. And over the past 10 years, we have worked hard to become the keystone for them as the secure and reliable infrastructure for HIPAA compliant document storage. Now let's welcome Steve, who's going to tell you more about our company and research.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to talk about a major problem facing our EHR customers, and it has to do with how healthcare institutions send and receive documents. Our customers are often operating with around a 25% overhead for administration work, and it's really high in the US compared to other countries, almost double. Mapped out here is part of the reason it's so costly. Our customers have to print out documents from the EHR to then physically mail or fax them to their business partners. So on top of being costly, it's often slow, it can be unreliable, and it lowers the quality of the documents. The proposal we're covering today is to look at how we can solve this issue in a profitable method while enhancing the business value that our platform gives to our customers. But before we jump into the solution, we want to talk about the methods we use to get to our recommendations.
Yeah, throughout our research with 14 different products, vendors, and solutions to come to you with the best options. Submitted along with this presentation will be supporting document with detailed research for each of the options we considered. We separate the system with 4 major parts. They are cloud hosting provider, self-development process, EHR integration, and cloud messaging client. A key part of our process was venting our findings with our executive sponsor, Patrick Gordon, who helped narrow down the options to the most viable solutions. And for the assumptions, we need to make some assumptions to plan successful projects, starting with the assumption that TechLA will have reasonable financial sources to cover the associated costs. Second one is the scale in future. This consideration implies that the organization will expand its consumer base and diversify its products. Thirdly, we work closely with our customers for requirements to provide valuable information regarding their business needs. This collaboration enables the product team to design and develop a robust email communication infrastructure that meets the consumer and business needs. Lastly, the project team will need relevant research and applicable skills to handle the project requirements, meet security needs, and deliver a functional product.
All right, so our proposed solution is a product built into our EHR called CloudBridge. CloudBridge is augmenting our customers' EHR with cloud storage and a document client to bridge the gap between them and their partners. From our customer's perspective, CloudBridge will be added functionality built within a familiar workspace of our EHR, enabling our customers to send and receive documents directly from within our platform to their partners. Additionally, our customers will be able to manage sent documents, revoke file access as needed, and have logging details for any audit needs. Our customers' partner groups, those that they're sending the documents to, will have access to a web-based document client to then access the files. However, if 2 institutions are both running CloudBridge, we can enable a direct data flow between the 2 EHR systems, so documents can be managed inside of the EHR for both parties. So the bottom line here is we're simplifying the workflow by allowing direct data flow from the EHR to our customers' partners by removing the overhead of analog systems. So for all this to work, we need to integrate cloud hosting as part of the solution. The hosting provider we want to consider is Google. They have an attractive and secure platform to build on, and they have some promising tech that's on the horizon, such as the Google Healthcare API. With this, we would be establishing a solution for our customers in the short term while looking at the direction the industry is moving so we can prepare for the strategic shift from locally hosted EHRs to a cloud-based one. So CloudBridge will be the first step in establishing us as a software as a service business model, making way for our business operations to then pivot in the years ahead of us. We're also recommending limiting the EHR integration to just our platform. There's no clear standard for interoperability between EHR systems in relation to documents, and we rely on the cloud hosting and the document client for enabling the access to our customers' documents. Finally, we want to recommend that we develop and manage the document client internally. That way we have full control over meeting the needs of our customers when it comes to security, functionality, and being able to provide excellent customer service. Next, we'd like to cover some of the risks we've identified for the project.
So it's important to have risk management to ensure our project success. Having a communication plan is key, especially in case of downtime or a service disruption. We also need strong authentication with encryption and physical security because data sabotage can happen at any moment. And maintaining the scope is important to mitigate financial risk or client rejection. And finally, we need to monitor and track system usage through metrics to determine if there's a requirement for storage growth. So our bottom line is that our return on investment is at 50%. In the implementation year, we will hit 1.8 million, which is comprised of one-time costs like the selection process and software, and recurring costs like additional labor. However, we make a profit on our product, and by the second year, we're already breaking even with our costs, and it gives us an overall profit of around 8.8 million over the course of the 5 years. So our project is expected to take a year, and as soon as we get approval from you, the executive board, we will kick off on May 3rd by initiating with our software and cloud vendors. We will then begin planning and move into the implementation stage. So we will continuously monitor our KPIs and close out on April 18th, 2021. We have a few milestones throughout the course of the project to check in with our stakeholders and ensure that the project is on track. So it'll take 12 months, have an implementation cost of 1.8 million, and we'll need to hire 2 new staff members. We will need to assign a full-time project manager from the PMO office and begin the RFP process to secure contracts with our preferred vendors. In addition, we'll need to post the 2 full-time positions. So we need approval from you. By implementing CloudBridge, we'll be able to provide seamless collaboration internally and externally for healthcare institutions. Medical workers, now more than ever with COVID-19, are demanding solutions that reduce costs while allowing them to focus on improving care, and CloudBridge is that solution.
Well, pending approval, here are the next steps we're going to take. A project kickoff meeting is needed, which will list all the roles, timeline, and budget. And we'll also do a review with our key stakeholders. And next, please. We appreciate your time today. And what questions do you have for us?
Okay, good job finishing up in just over 9 minutes. Let's see. Vicky, well, you didn't ask a question at the last team, so how about if you kick it off?
All right. Well, thank you very much. This is a very powerful presentation and has a lot of very good persuasive arguments in it and very well laid out. Thank you for that. So my question for you really is around the risks that you're managing and understanding how you went about identifying them and what level of interrogation did you do in order to identify them.
I can jump in first.
Okay.
So in our submitted reports, we did go into detail on a lot of the risks. And whenever you're dealing with healthcare institutions, you have to be, obviously HIPAA compliant as
yeah,
well
I wouldn't know
as
anything about that.
right. Well, that's the main worry, and that's what we spend a lot of time researching into, because when it comes to these subsystems that we're looking at potentially partnering with, we need to understand fully where they lie along those lines of being compliant and being secure. So we did a lot of research into, I think we had 14 different companies, and settling on Google wasn't necessarily easy, but Google's definitely kind of setting themselves up in that perspective that they, as a institution, want this to be a big part of their future market, especially when you look at, as I said in the presentation, like the API development and things like that too. So they're really looking at, okay, the EHR was the big change within the healthcare recently. What's going to be the next big change for healthcare? Well, it seems to be interoperability, right? So we want to partner with people that have that same view as we do when we're looking at the direction the market's going.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's Tom again. I thought it was kind of genius you're putting your background up with the Tech Alley backwards. looks like it's on the outside of a big window right
I have
behind
to
you.
apologize to my team. I got excited when the first team presented, and I'm like, okay, I can figure this out quick enough. And then I sent it to them. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry, guys.
No, just take credit for it. It's cool.
No,
All
it's
right.
ingenious. It looks like
Yeah.
you're sitting in an office.
I wondered if you could go into a little bit more of what kind of criteria you were using when you were comparing all the different possible solution approaches. Thanks.
Mhm.
So when it came to criteria, we were looking at obviously price, and a lot of the potential partners price things a little bit differently. So when it comes to cloud storage, from our research, you can buy it in several different methods. You can do it based off of how much storage you need. You can do it based off of the subsequent like benefits of the type of storage too. So one of the things that we found, which was kind of interesting, was there was a subdivision of types of cloud storage depending on how often you're going to access the files. So that led a whole discussion within our group about, okay, well, if we think about these, how often is a file that me as a healthcare institution going to need to be accessed if I'm sending it to like a clearinghouse who essentially will download it and likely just integrate into their workflows to get payment processed. So we had to really kind of drill down in some of these interesting thought experiments where we really got a chance to understand some of the really lower levels of how not only a health institution works, but also how their partners interact with them. So that's what led most of our decision making, was trying to be kind of empathetic to the needs of our customers. But also another interesting thing that we kind of learned along the way here too was when it came to an email client, it's pretty, I'm sorry, a document client. It's actually pretty hard to find HIPAA compliant software for that specific need. Often, whenever you just buy cloud storage, you can use what the cloud storage provider offers. But in our case here, we needed more control over the means in which the customers, as well as their partners, are actually accessing those files. Need able to log and report on that information. Health institutions have this requirement of a paper trail for years and years and years. It's much longer than most other institutions. So those are some of the considerations we're using for building our recommendations.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that.
Yep.
I have a question, if I could.
Go ahead, Kevin.
So as you're looking at this system, are you looking at it for the transfer of patient information and building that bond? It seems like that's part of it, but part of the HIPAA requirements are making sure you have all the agreements and the right kind of agreements between those agencies. Are you automating that portion of the process as well to allow that sharing of information? Is that part of the piece here? I felt like I heard a bit of that, but I didn't hear the conclusion that that is or is not included.
Right. I'm sorry to talk so much just for our group. I'm kind of the tech nerd among us, so I'm going to have to take this one too. I'm sorry. But when it comes to what we were discussing as a group, yes, what we were looking to do is mostly focus on the transfer of physical documents. So for instance, let's say I am a provider and I have a new patient transferring into my hospital from maybe out of state, right? And we were looking at, okay, how do they get all the patient records to help this new customer from their perspective? It's often done through faxes. Sometimes it's just printed off. Some places do have means of transferring things digitally, right? But there's not a standard from the EHR level. So right. It's dependent on each organization. So when it comes to
Is
the
there at
actual,
least a validation? I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Was
then
it?
I'll.
Okay, so
Is there at least a validation process that you have that the entity you're transmitting to, you have the HIPAA business agreement in place and it's the right kind before you transmit?
Yeah, so no, that's a great question. When it comes to the transferring the documents, those business service level agreements that you're kind of talking about will still need to exist as they do in the current state. But one of the real benefits I see from here is if I'm sending my patient record over to a new hospital and it's being faxed, there does need to be that HIPAA compliance on both ends there, but you're still kind of just within the workflow fundamentally setting up the system where a printer on the other side is just spitting out all these milk records and it just has to sit on top of this printer up until an individual walks over there and grabs them, right? So this will actually, I think, just fundamentally reduce the amount of potential for HIPAA violations by removing a lot of the physicality out of this process. So that's hopefully getting to the root of your question. If not, we can clarify a bit more.
I'll have to call time.
Okay.
But good job. You can unshare your screen and go back on mute. And we are at the halfway point, so let's take a 5-minute break and stretch, go refresh your drinks, and we'll start up again in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, we should all be coming back. And we have team number 1 that is up next. So if we can set up, and who will be driving the slides for team 1? Mavero.
Hey, it's Mary Grace. I'll be driving the slides.
All right, Mary Grace has got the slides. So go ahead and share your desktop when you're ready.
Great.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
We're good? Okay. Okay. So whenever you're ready to start, you have your whole team assembled and ready?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Whenever you're ready to go, start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to talk about the IT expansion strategy at TSPC. On the call with us today, we have Van Lee, the Executive Director of IT Cybersecurity and Operations, Mary Grace Pellegrini, the Chief Information Officer, Roberto Guzman, the Executive Director of Infrastructure, Networks, and Data Centers, and myself, Erin Cardwell, the Executive Director of Development and Research and Design. These 4 members of our team, our internal TSPs, these 4 members make up our internal TSPC research team for this expansion strategy. Although we consulted several other experts and industry reports to be able to present to you these findings today. As most of you know, TSPC is a medium-sized solar panel manufacturer, but is one of the top producers in the United States. We are based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and have an annual revenue of $500 million. Recently, our brilliant sales team won an RFP for a very substantial government contract that is equivalent to about 20% of our current business. This is great news, but also means we will have to temporarily move our facilities as we build out our current building to respond to the increased demand.
Thank you, Erin. So on January 2020, our company won a lucrative government contract. By February, there were major internal discussions that ultimately led to the decision to move to a temporary location and build out our existing offices over the next year. By March, we spent that time determining our data expansion strategy. And so here we are in April, asking you, the TSCP senior management team to approve our first major decision in the process. The first major question is to answer the following slowly. Should TSPC maintain an on-premise data warehouse, or should we move to the cloud at this time? On the next slide, our key consideration for this analysis was centered around three main themes: financial, efficiency, and security. After careful consideration of these three factors, a clear leading option emerged. We will present to you our analysis of these three factors and the resulting recommendation. Although we believe the analysis will speak for itself, we are seeking your endorsement to move forward with the recommended strategy after presenting our findings to you this evening.
Thanks, Van. So as we look at the three main criteria that we've considered for this decision, the first one that I'll touch on today is the financial cost. So for our financial analysis, we focused on determining the annual cost of each strategy, as these would be ongoing expenses. Our analysis showed that a full cloud migration will result in about $790,000 annually, or almost 40% of our IT operating budget. These main savings are largely originating from our IT salary costs, but also have significant savings in areas like physical security staff, utilities, HVAC upgrades, and other network demands. The second area that we focused on for our analysis is the efficiency standpoint. In comparing our current on-site strategy and or an expansion of on-site capabilities versus a full cloud migration, there are some significant trade-offs here as far as implementation time and agility and scalability. In particular, I'd like to call out under implementation time, there is a significant difference between the cost of moving our data center once versus twice. In an on-site strategy, as we will need to be moving to a temporary location in our upcoming year, if we pursue a continued on-site strategy, we would need to ultimately move our data center twice. Whereas with the full cloud migration, we would be able to only move once, which would incur significant cost savings and productivity for our team, allowing our IT function to move up the value chain within the organization. I'd also like to touch on some agility and scalability benefits that we would see with the full cloud migration. So consider the environment in which we're operating from the perspective of the Porter's Five Forces. Overall, this market, the solar panel industry, is challenging, whereas suppliers and buyers, there's numerous ones. There's low threats of new entry and high substitution, meaning that overall we have high competition within the industry. And because of this, we think that there's instability in overall IT demand based on fluctuations in levels of business. As such, we think some of these benefits from time, agility, and scalability outweigh some of the on-site strategic benefits that we've forecasted. And finally, the question of security. When looking at on-site strategy and full cloud migration, an on-site strategy does allow for more control and a more complete view of our data. However, we believe that the full cloud migration option is overall less resource intensive, and these benefits of scalability while also maintaining a high level of security lead us to believe that it still has the same spectrum of security protocols that we would want to see in this decision-making process. In summation, we recommend a full cloud migration for TSPC to pursue in the coming year. In particular, as we mentioned in our three key areas of cost efficiency and security, we think that the cloud migration option stands out. Not only would this result in about $800,000 in annual savings, but it would also lead us to have a faster and more efficient timeframe and scalability options, while also maintaining the security and safety that our clients anticipate.
Thank you, Mary Grace. So now moving on to potential risks and our mitigation plans. So after doing some research, we identify the most common risks associated with cloud migration, and we categorize them into three main major areas for which we define a mitigation strategy. For data security, we will assess data protection policies and standards from vendors, evaluate their protection measures, and identify remediation actions. For access controls, we will establish hierarchical and role-specific login credentials with two-factor authentication This will prevent unintended or malicious provisioning of new instances of servers in our new cloud services. And this will also prevent shadow IT. For staff preparedness, we will work with the cloud service provider and consultants to guarantee proper training of our staff. And we will break down tasks into responsibilities by teams. Next. We have narrowed down the pool of potential cloud service providers to the top 2 candidates for a comparative analysis, AWS and Azure. Pending your approval today, our next step is to run a pilot in the month of May with a final service provider decision to be made in June. For the implementation, we will work with migration planning partners depending on the service provider chosen. This will position us to execute migration fully in July and use the fall months for continued monitoring and evaluation. One of the great benefits of choosing to migrate to the cloud is that with only one move required, we should be fully operational long before the end of next year. And finally, as you will recall, we are here today to respond to the question, should TCP remain on a premise data warehouse, or should we move to the cloud at this time? As we have shown, a move to the cloud is the right choice for TCP, given the benefits in cost efficiency and security. We need you to support full cloud migration, and now we welcome any questions that you may have for us.
Okay, good. Who wants to kick this off?
I'm happy to go, Ed.
Okay.
So thank you. This looks exciting. It's always fun to see an organization grow and these are nice problems to have, right? So in looking at this and knowing that this is a true growth situation for the entire organization, how broad did you throw your net when you were looking at other extenuating circumstances in the organization as you would be looking to make this move and how it might impact other parts of the organization?
I can take a stab at that. So I should add, within the context of this decision, is assuming a thriving economy. So within the case and the scope of our overall question here, we framed this under the assumptions of operating in an economy and normal business climate. And so we did look, broadly speaking, at the pressures facing the solar panel industry broadly. We know for our company as a domestic producer, we're sort of an unusual case in that most other producers that are thriving currently in the industry have started to move operations and manufacturing abroad. So we have considered those cost pressures that the business is facing. We think that we are uniquely positioned as a domestic producer with a competitive cost structure, that this allows us to continue to position ourselves for growth, but we are cognizant of the overall downward pressures on the industry and the negative trends that there are. It's overall sort of a flat growth within the industry, and so we believe that we are unique in the instance that we are growing, but we did look broadly at some of the global pressures facing the industry as a whole.
Thank you.
I think just to elaborate that on a little bit, Mary Grace, if you don't mind pulling up the Porter's 5 Forces slide too. I think that supports our argument as well. So we considered all of these factors that Mary Grace mentioned on a broader scale in the industry.
Thank you.
Ed, can I jump in for one?
Yeah, please, Mark.
So, cloud is great, and cloud is the buzz and has been popular for many years now. As companies have lifted and shifted their presence. But cloud can't be all rainbows and puppies. There's got to be some downside to cloud in the future. Did you find anything in your research that said we got to be aware of these 1 or 2 things that may hold us in cloud for the future?
I can try this one first. First, I would like to say it is the clouds. There's definitely rainbows. I hope no puppies up there in this. But
Well, Mark, I just want to say you burst my bubble all the way around on that.
We had actually really interesting conversation early on with the CIO of Solar Edge, which is a international solar manufacturer. And I think we went into that conversation assuming the same thing, rainbows, maybe some puppies. And they actually do a lot of their data centers and data storage on site, and it's for security reasons. They're based out of Israel, and they have manufacturers in China. So I think that is a lot to do with their international landscape. So I think we actually went into this with a much more open mind about both options than I think we would have without that conversation. But as we did the cost analysis and saw the efficiencies and kind of the situation of the solar industry itself, and also with the fact that we were located in the United States, I think everything just kept pushing us towards the cloud decision.
I would like to add in terms of the size of the company. Maybe at least for what I've heard from other another class, larger companies tend to not migrate to the cloud or roll back to in-house data centers because their operational expenses become too expensive over time, because that's a constant bill that you have to pay month by month or by year, and you keep paying it forever. So, but in a small company or mid-sized company, it might make more sense to migrate to the cloud because that gives you the flexibility for either expansion or the opposite.
Great. You went all the way around it. One of the biggest drawbacks in the cloud is once you're there, you're locked in. And getting back out and going from Microsoft to Amazon or Microsoft to back on-prem is always a challenge for an organization. Thanks, guys. Great.
I have a question. It's Kevin.
Go ahead, Kevin.
So in the presentation, I saw a lot of maybe what Mark was alluding to, a lot of the sort of why this is a great idea to move to the cloud. But what I didn't see is the analysis that says, and I'm a numbers guy, right? So I grew up in ops side of the world. So everything's about taking out the fiction and making it facts. And even if it's in explicit detail in your report, I'm not seeing the same amount of detail here. I see your CapEx and OpEx that you have up here, but it would seem to me there's some of those other elements, and Vicky brought them up earlier with one of the other groups. What's the implicit training? What's that going to do to impact your IT? Are you going to be able to downscale, 15% of your IT staff because you're getting some of that intelligence out of the cloud? What's the training associated with it? Hard dollars are here, but what's the rest of that look like? And a little bit more detail on the other two areas as well that have some numbers behind that for the rationale. Is there anything you can comment on there or help me with?
Yeah, I can take a first stab, and then maybe Aaron or Van might have some additional comments there. So, we did talk about and have in our report some of the elements of the initial costs that you would be comparing for the on-site versus the full cloud migration. For example, with the on-site strategy, we did an estimate of, roughly $10,000 per server of transition cost that you would need. So we're looking about $50,000 for 2 moves, about $100,000 in additional cost for that. And then also just sort of on the softer side, we talked about some of the challenges that you may see with training staff in the staff transition phase. And broadly speaking, kind of looking at what some of that institutional transformation would be. We've discussed as a team what the on-site move would be as we either look to scale and or train that team, or if we shift to the full cloud migration, we would need to go, you're right, we would need to go through a process of looking at reassigning staff and looking at how that streamlining process might be.
And just to add to that, Mary Grace, if you don't mind going to the financial slide in the appendices with the people aspect of it. I think it's slide 21.
Yes, and there's a lag time.
Well, when the slide loads, you can see that we did consider the number of individuals, their salaries, and what that would look like from a people's perspective. And then we also have slides for the network and hardware and additional costs that are all built out, additional costs in this case, mostly consisting of what Mary Grace talked about during the presentation, like the HVAC and other types of utilities that, you know, might be an oversight to someone who hadn't considered all of the many factors that go into it.
So A+ for having that in your appendix, because so many people can talk around that and not say, oh, here was the summary of what I needed to be able to tell you. But the question came up and you guys were able to say, well, I do have that in my appendix. So awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good job. And we need to move on to the next team. So if you would unshare your desk, and team number 5, which is, I'm sorry, yes, team 5, Nimbus is up.
Yep, and I am doing the slides.
Anna's driving, okay.
Let me share my screen. Okay. Is my team ready? I don't see Adam. Is Adam ready?
Adam, you may need to come off mute and say hi.
I hope he's ready. I'm going to start because he's later. Okay, so hi, we're Team Nimbus, and today we're going to be outlining our proposed solution for navigating away from an in-house on-premise email system to the cloud. So my name's Hannah, and I'm joined by my teammates, Yujwan, Rohit, and Adam, if he's here. And we'd also like to thank our mentor, Michael Matza, for his extremely valuable guidance and feedback throughout this project. So we work as a project team within a large IT consulting company that specializes in cloud infrastructure services and moving companies over to the cloud. So the overall problem we're aiming to solve is that the current on-premise email system using Microsoft Exchange is simply outdated. Additionally, the company's been struggling and needs to find ways to cut costs wherever possible. And lastly, the company suffered from prior security breaches, so minimizing the risk of that happening again is really important.
So here's some background info that we conjured based on our understanding of the company and the cloud. There are many other companies that have made transitions from on-prem emails to cloud-based emails. A good example is FHI 360, who switched over from on-prem email to Microsoft Office 365. This has solved many of their accessibility issues when working internationally. It's also been shown that over time, moving email to the cloud has significant cost advantages. Many companies that have made the transition have spoken about this, and as you'll see in our budget slide, our projections also show this trend. Cloud-based email also tends to be more secure because service providers such as Google and Microsoft tend to be well ahead of the world when it comes to security and authentication. One of our unknowns when going into the study was that we didn't fully understand what the employees' perception of the cloud was or what they thought about migrating to the cloud. You can imagine that if sentiment is already not great, we may have trouble with this migration. We also didn't completely understand the on-prem costs with relation to software licenses, server costs, and maintenance costs. Some assumptions we made were that we were a middle-tier medical documents company, not at the top, but not at the bottom. We assumed that we were using Microsoft Exchange for our company's current on-prem email. We also figured that IT was already working with legal and compliance to follow regulations, like not sending protected health information over email or following any other HIPAA regulations. We also assumed that the current email system had no pressing issues with it and that the CIO would work with relevant stakeholders to get feedback on preferred cloud systems.
Now, while there are a number of factors besides just cost, we've focused on cost as the distinguishing factor between the different possible email services. At the top, you can see our what we currently have, an on-premise Microsoft Exchange server, which over 5 years cost over $400,000. And the reason we did this over 5 years is because after 3 years or so, you need to replace the server. And this also allows us to factor in things like depreciation, employee wages to maintain the server and all of that. Some cloud providers we looked at were Google's G Suite and Microsoft Office 365. They have different costs. It's based on per box, and we're focusing on an assumption of 700 users, 700 mailboxes, and there's also an initial upfront cost to migrate those mailboxes. However, if you look at the numbers in the chart, it's pretty clear to see which one we think is the best. As you can see, we recommend switching over to Microsoft Office 365. In addition to the cost savings, there's some other good reasons to do so. First off, the company is already a part of the Microsoft ecosystem. They're used to using, Microsoft email and other Microsoft software. So the kind of growing pains of transitioning over should be minimal. It's also very easily scalable, among the easiest to scale if we get a bunch more employees or if we need to cut back in some way. So it's very easy to grow or decrease size. And it's also useful anywhere in the world. If you have an internet connection, you can access your email. So it's very handy. But it's not perfect, and so let's look at some of the risks. When we were looking at the risks, we were focused mainly on, between Office 365 versus G Suite. And this is, in addition to some of the cost savings, how we decided. One thing about Office 365 is that's a little less collaborative than G Suite. However, Microsoft does offer services that allow comparable collaboration, and if that's something that we decide is important, there is a way to implement that. An interesting thing about Office 365 is that if you create a file on a lower security software and then upload it through email, it maintains that vulnerability. In order to fix that, we're going to have to make sure that all software and all files are updated to an appropriate level of security before we do the migration. And we'll work with Microsoft to make sure that they're always keeping their security at the highest level. They will be, but we'll make sure to verify it. There's also the risk that if users are reluctant to learn, or if they have problems learning about the email, the cloud email, that it'll lead to an increase in the number of support tickets and the time and cost spent doing support. Part of the way we're going to mitigate that is the fact that we're already used to Microsoft, should ease some of those pains, but we're also going to move departments one at a time. So if we find a problem, we can fix it before it's a problem for the entire company. And we're also looking at reassigning some IT personnel to help desk, or even hiring temporary help if we need it to help deal with some of those support issues. So we've got ways to mitigate these risks.
So we expect that the transition from on-premise email to cloud email will take about 12 weeks to accomplish. For the first 1 to 2 weeks, we're going to work with upper management and figure out which option they would like to implement, select a few employees from every department to try out the new email system, and then figure out the order for a department by department migration. After that, we're going to let the selected employees try out the system for a week and gather feedback on the new system. Then we're going to spend about 8 weeks migrating everyone to a new system, department by department, starting with the IT department, so that they can help out and eventually take over support for the system. If something goes wrong during the migration, the current on-premise email system will still be running. We will not be changing completely to cloud email until a week after every department has been migrated, just in case there are any issues. And we will spend 1 week finishing everything up and switching fully from on-premise email to cloud email. So they have a week to get used to everything. We would like $60,000 to migrate from on-premise email to Microsoft Office 365 cloud email. This includes the cost for Microsoft Office 365 for the first year. This also includes temporary help and any transition pains that may occur. We're going to be using an external service to transfer emails, and we're going to be taking care of the transition, which is supposed to take about 12 weeks. Since the on-premise email will be completely replaced by cloud email, any money that was originally for the on-premise email budget can go towards the cloud budget. We expect Microsoft Office 365 cloud email to cost about $60 per employee for the first year and $48 per employee every year afterwards. So by spending $60,000 now, the company could save more than 50% on email in the long run, because on-premise email is expected to cost about $115 per employee per year. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay. That was a record finish time. Tom, do you want to kick off the questions?
Yeah, I just, seeing the timeline, I thought that looked really optimistic, and wondered whether you had given that a lot of thought. I guess it depends on how many departments you have, but it takes a while for people to get used to new things like that, and there's always kind of glitches. So I wondered if there was time in there to go back and fix some of those things, or to help with the employee education that was going to be required to get beyond those kind of transition problems.
I can start if no one else has anything immediate to say. I think part of the 8-week transition period, and as part of staggering it, is that we can figure out problems as they arise. And so while there may be, it may take 2 or 3 weeks to migrate the first department, once we've got our feet wet in that, it should go easier. And we'll be working with an outside company that has experience in migrating everything. That's part of the reason why the first year costs more, is that we got to pay for that. But one of the things we're doing is that we're migrating the IT department first. So that way they'll get familiar with it, and as we get questions from users who are confused or have some issues that they're uncomfortable with, the IT department will already not only just know about the software, they'll be experienced with it, having used it for a few weeks. So that should hopefully help keep our timeline down.
Okay, thank you.
Who's got the next question?
I'll take it if you don't mind it.
Okay.
So one of the pain points, the biggest pain points in these two platforms is when you shift from one to another. And in the last 8 years, my perspective is probably a bit prejudiced, because we keep going from Microsoft to Google in two different organizations. So what I wanted to check is, one of the things I've found most challenging when changing platforms either way is, what do your clients or the folks that you need to collaborate with outside your organization, what are they using, and how are you accommodating that integration or connection to those outside the organization? In this case, patients. Did you consider that in your decision? Sorry.
We considered it in the sense that, we want to use products that give maximum security. So I think in the scenario of Google, we've looked at companies that had issues with Google Docs and the way things are shared, especially like private documents. And that's part of the reason what we saw is a lot of the medical industry itself is fueled by Microsoft and Microsoft Documents. And I think that's where we lean towards that. And of course, if we are working with partners or patients or any other companies that are looking for doc files or, Excel spreadsheets or, Microsoft PowerPoints, if we start sharing Google products with them, it's just kind of like we stick out like a sore thumb. So that's definitely something we thought about and fueled our desire to stick with Microsoft.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask you a financial question. Vicki and I are going to switch roles here. You had detailed that your second year costs, you thought we were going to be about $48 per user for Microsoft Office 365. Can you give me some background on how you guys came to that number? I mean, that's a very low price for a Office 365 email tier. Which one were you choosing? Which products were bundled in that? And as a result, is that aligned to what the business is going to need going forward?
What that number is based off of, it is based off of Microsoft's lowest and essentially cheapest email tier. Our focus for this was just was the email and not necessarily some of the other document software. If need be, you know, we'd obviously have to reevaluate some of those costs if this goes well and the upper management says we would love to move all of our documents to the cloud. But this was based on essentially just email, a limited amount of storage for each mailbox. I think it was 50 gigabytes, which is a lot for email. So at $4 a user a month, it's pretty much just email. But again, we could look further into other document management software if that's something that we wanted to go above and beyond on.
So I'll make one comment on that, and it may have come up in your research or not come up in the research. When you do buy into those lower tiers from Microsoft, you do miss out on the tools like advanced security as part of it, and it doesn't have a robust backup solution either. So you'll be looking from those things from external providers to provide a cloud backup of your email, which I assume is going to be very important with your HIPAA compliance that you need to be able to meet going forward.
That's an excellent point. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you.
If you would unshare your screen, and if Team 2 Muse would set up. And who's going to be driving from the Muse team?
I am Emily.
Emily will be driving. Okay, great. So go ahead and share your desktop and then let us know when your whole team is ready and we'll get started.
Okay, I think we're ready. Ready, team?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us and offering us your time. We are Team Muse. Myself and my team conduct technology consulting for Accenture. Let me start by introducing the team. My name is Emily Trumpauer, and I'm the senior consultant.
Hello, I'm Ucha Eke, and I'm the technical lead.
Hi, I'm Marina Gulas, and I'm the financial analyst.
Hi, I'm Spandan Rath, and I was the researcher for the team.
This team has been working over the past 3 months to fully analyze and assess Sigma's situation and opportunities as they relate to your email platform. Email is vitally important to conducting day-to-day business. However, each individual email communication adds up to 2 things: data storage and money. Now, before we get into the assessment, I want to orient all of our potential audience to who Sigma is and what they do. As the senior management team knows, Sigma is a large health insurance company. They have a large customer base and offer both commercial coverage for employers as well as government services like Medicare and Medicaid. They have been in business since 1985 and currently employ over 35,000 employees and manage approximately $53 billion in assets. Now that you have an idea of who Sigma is and what they do, let's move on to why we're here. Sigma is currently utilizing 5 servers on site and staffing a data center to secure email data. Company-wide, Sigma has added over 300 employees in the past year, and with that type of growth, there is a potential for issues in scalability and cost containment with Microsoft Exchange and local servers. Sigma's email communication could be modernized by moving to a cloud-based service. Making this move will not only modernize the organization, but also increase reliability. Additionally, 75% of your competitors, such as Aetna and Humana, have already made the move to a cloud-based service. This means as a company, Sigma is falling behind. Today, we're going to show you how Sigma can benefit both strategically and financially from shifting email to the cloud, as well as which cloud service would be most beneficial for Sigma. To start us off, Uche, our technical lead, will cover the current and future state of the email system.
Thank you, Emily. So our goal for this project is to help Sigma pick the best cloud-based vendor. Let's go over the current and future states of Sigma's emailing system. For the past 10 years, Sigma has been using Microsoft Exchange as their main emailing system. Currently, Sigma has approximately 35,000 mailboxes under the Exchange management. It costs $44 per user for a 1-year license. When totaling up these numbers, Sigma pays $1.53 million per year in licensing costs. There are also hardware costs that need to be mentioned. Hardware costs for servers will keep increasing due to a growing bandwidth, so Sigma will have to keep investing in new servers to maintain the core functionality. Our vision for the future state of Sigma's emailing system will be using the cloud. The cloud is a virtualized information technology computing environment. Now, if we look at the first picture, we see the current state for the email exchange system that we're in. As we can see, there are multiple layers of exchanges as well as several different moving components, which makes the maintenance of the solution extremely tedious. There's a high risk that any of these components can break down at any point. And if that were the case, the entire system would crash. However, we can see that if we move to the cloud service, the distribution of systems is streamlined and Sigma's information systems are firmly assigned to roles, which in turn results in zero breakdown interdependencies. Now, Spandan will go over our recommendations as well as benefits and risks.
All right, thanks, Uche. So to implement the cloud infrastructure, we have two ways to do it, either build it in-house or outsource it. Hence, we're faced with a make versus buy decision. Since making cloud is really expensive and not to mention complicated, we gathered some market insight and did some competitive intelligence, and we have narrowed it down to these three vendors. So our first vendor is Microsoft 365. It's a Microsoft-based cloud email system supported by Azure, and it comes along with other applications as well. Since the current and future vendors are the same in this case, transferring the email data and doing the lift and shift will be extremely easy. Our next vendor that we looked at was Google. The Google Cloud Platform is an excellent choice for high volume data storage, as well as improvements in scalability and performance. And last but not least, we have Amazon Web Services. Simply put, AWS is the most popular and widely used cloud solution out there. Next slide, please. So here on the screen, we now have a qualitative analysis of all the functionality requirements that we would need from a cloud-based email platform, rated on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. As we can see, the total overall score of Microsoft 365 is the highest in comparison to all other vendors. Our biggest non-negotiable component when moving into the cloud infrastructure for email services is privacy and HIPAA compliance. As we can see, Microsoft 365 guarantees us extremely high compliance with the HIPAA rules as compared to the other two competitors. Another major reason to go to the Microsoft 365 route is because the email capability of the system is higher than all the other competitors. All other features like cost, data security, scalability, and user experience are drastically improved by moving into any cloud infrastructures when compared to the current infrastructure that we're in. So moving forward with a future email system using the cloud, here are some of the benefits and risks. Storage. It's a benefit because cloud vendors buy a lot of storage and pass those savings on to customers. Security. It is managed by the cloud provider and contains security protocols to present customers with a safe cloud. The costs. Usually a flat rate monthly fee, and you can reduce both CAPEX and OPEX when moving to the cloud. Last but not least, increase in reliability and uptime. When you store data in the cloud, you ensure it's backed up and protected, which in turn helps with your continuity plan. Sorry, excuse that. Because in the event of a crisis, you'll be able to minimize any downtime and loss of productivity due to increase in geographical redundancy. But of course, there are a few risks that we need to keep an eye out for when integrating the email service to the cloud. They are learning a new technology, compatibility issues, and lastly, insufficient due diligence, increasing cybersecurity risk. As shown in the diagram, benefits outweigh the risks because we plan on reducing the risks by dedicating 4 of our internal engineers and transferring them into the role of infrastructural engineers to lower the strain on the IT staff as a whole. We'll be providing you with due diligence to lower cybersecurity risks and compatibility issues during the entire migration process. Now I'll hand it over to Marina for financials and the project timeline.
Thank you, Spandan. So as a financial analyst, I analyze Sigma's current costs for Microsoft Exchange and possible future costs if you were to switch over to Microsoft 365. The annual costs for Microsoft Exchange fall under 3 main categories: software, hardware, and labor costs. These annual costs total to about $2 million. If Sigma were to switch over to Microsoft 365, there would be an implementation cost of about $2.5 million. The annual costs after implementation would only be software and labor. Although the licensing for Microsoft 365 is a little more expensive than Microsoft Exchange, you can see that Sigma will have no more hardware costs, and they will also cut labor costs. The annual cost for Microsoft 365, excluding implementation, will total to about $1.7 million, which is less than Microsoft Exchange. Over 5 years, the total cost for Microsoft Exchange is about $10.2 million, whereas for Microsoft 365, it would be around $8.8 million. This means if Sigma was to switch over to Microsoft 365 in 5 years, they would save $1.4 million and get 13.83 return on investment in 5 years. If you want to see the breakdown of the implementation, software, hardware, and labor costs over 5 years, you can see a more detailed budget plan in our final report. Financially, it makes sense to move over to Microsoft 365, as Sigma will end up having a large return on investment and eventually save more money in the long run. So regarding project timeline, we're going to have Microsoft 365 up and running in less than a year. Here you can see the estimated project timeline and its stages. If you'd like more detail on the steps for each of these stages, you can find those within our final report as well. But the bottom line here is that Microsoft 365 will be launched in 7 to 8 months. So based on our research and financial considerations, we recommend that Sigma move over to Microsoft 365. Not only would you stay in line with your competitors and increase reliability, but Sigma would also save money. So what we need from you today is an endorsement to move forward with Microsoft 365. Thank you for your time, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, right on the nose. Excellent. Okay, who wants to start off the questions this time?
I will. It's Kevin.
Kevin, go ahead.
So I would be very interested, 2 parts. I would be very interested when you're laying out that cost analysis. You've predisposed, and that's perfectly fine, by the way, to move to Office 365. But it would be very interesting, and if you were presenting to me what you are, I would ask in that chart to show me the cost for AWS and Google as well. Just to know that, if they're only $250,000 a year to operate, we'd be having a different discussion than letting everybody run off the Office 365, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'd like to see those comparisons in the presentation.
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, I'll take this question. While cost is definitely a factor in any of these type of decisions, it wasn't one of our main driving one, because we needed to make sure that we were moving to a platform that would provide the most security for the amount of PHI that we handle and send, or Sigma handles and sends. And so we did do a little bit of digging into the cost, and we know that we're saving money, but it wasn't a driving decision.
Okay, and then
go ahead.
What about your? So many of you are making decisions to move to the cloud, and you know I'm with Mark. There's a lot of great things about it, but it's not all rainbows and puppies and kittens, and I haven't heard anybody say, oh, and I have everyone said, oh, it's far more reliable. And I'll even give you that those three companies are going to make your servers and your email more reliable. What I haven't heard anybody tell me that they're taking into account is the physical connectivity. Because as soon as you move everything out of in-house and you can rely on your own infrastructure, now you're relying on the one single connection, which is probably less bandwidth than you will need when everybody has to go remote for everything that they do into the cloud. And so I haven't heard anybody say, oh, I'm going to have to triple my bandwidth. And now because I'm 100% reliable external, I probably need two connections that are separate into my office facility so that I have a redundancy to keep me at the same level of uptime. Have you considered that at all?
Yeah, so I can take that question. So Emily, if you don't mind going to the matrix again for all the vendors. So we did discuss this during like when we were brainstorming ideas as to which direction to move along. And as you can see in the control aspect, we gave it a 3 because we do understand that there is a big trade-off that we'll be losing a little bit of control when we're moving into a cloud infrastructure because it's not going to be our own and we have to kind of go through a third-party channel for that. So we did put that into consideration and put it as like a 3 compared to the 5 that we have for Microsoft Exchange currently. Now, with that being said, the reason why we did suggest moving to the cloud still is because, as you mentioned, there's the geographical redundancy that we get from moving onto the cloud. And in case, like, God forbid that there is a disaster or a crisis that happens geographically, we can make sure that it's not like regional. And because of that, we'll be able to kind of go ahead and keep the uptime running for that. But that was a great question. Thank you.
I had a question on the financials. If we could go back to that slide, please.
You're all taking turns being CFO. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. I didn't. It wasn't really clear when you break even and start saving money from this. You know, it's probably embedded in here, but it's not. It doesn't really stand out.
Yeah, so we decided from these financial costs that we were going to break even in year 2. Since we're saving $1.4 million a year and the implementation costs will be $2.5 million, we'll be able to break even around year 2.
So
okay.
let me go back into my role, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because I have questions about the financials as well. So anytime I'm always suspect when labor costs go down, because I think that is a bit of a red herring, I think was pointed out in a previous presentation. Because there are things that affect this. So it would be good to understand your assumptions on why the labor costs are going down. And yes, what does that actually mean in headcount or full-time equivalents?
Yeah, so
and Vicki, could I tack on to that before they answer?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, you know, Vicki's saying it super nice, and as the operations guy much of the time and the CEO in a different role, I would be right to the point of asking for names, right? And that's a hard thing for everybody. Everybody says, and I heard 4 presentations today say we'd reduce labor costs. I'll buy into that you might reduce the cost for that project, but everyone has said the people will go into other areas of the company. That doesn't reduce labor costs. That is where Vicki's saying there's a red herring. And so when people come to me with these projects, I do the hard thing. Tell me the people that you're laying off as a part of this project and how many there are, because that's the only way you actually end up realizing those savings. Now, it could go into a position where other parts of the company are hiring, but I would go so far as to say you have to name the names before you start this project. And so I'm tacking that on to Vicky's question.
Yeah, so in our current budget, we estimated that we would have, well, we do have 5 data center personnel that we're accounting for. So that's where the 500,000 come from, and that's including their benefits as well. The reason we are going down to 200,000 is because we actually did account for laying off 3 of those personnel. And in our report, we actually broke down underneath the implementation costs for our future state of Microsoft 365, who we would be dropping and who we would be keeping based on who we need for the project. So after implementation of the project is completed and we don't need those initial people, we are going to keep a cloud specialist, and we're going to also keep a server specialist on the team. So we basically did account for the fact that we will be losing those 3 personnel, and they wouldn't be going into the company elsewhere. And that's because, again, we don't need as many people to maintain the on-site servers for the email premises. So since we don't need those people anymore to watch those servers and maintain them, we no longer need them. So we're just gonna let them go.
So just not a big critique, but when you actually lay people off, there's a cost to do that. So it's not a dollar for dollar savings, right? There's some sort of percentage of severance and termination and those kinds of things that get involved there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we kind of have to consider and maybe discuss a little bit more with the team. And definitely from what we saw with the savings and the return on investment, we thought that it was pretty high, and it'd be a good return on investment. So.
Okay, good job.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of our 6 presentations. You can unshare your screen, and we can take another 5-minute break now, and I'll set up the breakout room for the judges, so you can have a private discussion in the breakout room. So everyone else, take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back at 7:42.
Ed, are you kind of like magically moving us into the breakout room, or do we need to
Yeah,
actively do something?
I'm now going through the list of 30 names we have here, just making sure that I have the right ones going. Yeah, okay, now I got them all. Let me. You should get an invitation to now join.
There we go.
And as you click on that invitation, you should go into the breakout room, and then there'll be 5 of you there. Everybody else, take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 7:42. Okay, as people are coming back, the attendance and survey form that we've been doing each week has been posted in the Slack window under the lecture channel. So you can fill that out there. The self-evaluations that each team needs to do individually and anonymously, that assignment should be now released on Canvas. It's at this link to fill out that form, but that's been set up as an assignment in Canvas. Really important to complete those because they impact how the grades for the senior management team project are allocated. More explanation of that is in the assignment. Let me pause here and say, any questions so far on anything we've done so far before I sort of give a brief retrospective for the class? And I should double check just to see if we have anything in the chat window. Okay. All right. No outstanding questions in the chat window. So let me briefly talk about the semester. So we started off with this premise that management is doing things right and leadership is doing the right things. And so those actually compatible but different mindsets were an important part of our discussion. So this is something I learned from Kevin McRitchie's company, Cisco, about eating your own dog food, which means that you have to use the products you yourself design or recommend. And since I am the proponent of the 3x3 method, I'm going to eat my own dog food now and give you a 3x3 summary of the course. The top 3 takeaways: strategies, transformational, getting from now to a destination. Destination is the important part about strategy. Operations are more transactional, increasing quality and efficiency. And then engaged people make things happen. And a bit of the Pygmalion effect too. It's important to expect them to do well to succeed. And that collaboration gets you to a new level of performance. We saw that certainly in the Phoenix project. And this is first about valuing people and valuing the contributions that they make. Top three critical questions that I would hope that you ask in each IT leadership situation in which you may find yourself. Number one is, what's the bottom line of your message? What's the essence? What's the story? What's the key metaphor that you can use to describe what it is that you're attempting to communicate, strategy or otherwise? Ask to where, why, and for whom before how. We're excellent problem solvers at UM, but the how is something that needs to pause and wait until we've answered these other questions first. And then in conflict situations, are you going to go to the balcony and then ask and rather than or questions, which is something we learned from Tom DeMarco and one of the exercises that we did. So that's the 3x3 on the class. We've done a whole bunch of assignments, and I thought it might be useful just to see those represented on a diagram where they have plugged into each of the 3 main units of strategy, alignment, structure, operations, staffing, and people. And you can see that we have, in fact, covered quite a bit of ground. And then ethics and values, which we had last week, cut across all of the areas. I'd like to leave you with a story. This is actually a story that I heard from the co-owner of the Caravan Gift Shop in Nichols Arcade. I hope they're not going out of business with this current crisis. But in March of 2017, he told me this story about a professor that came to class, and every time at the beginning of the class, he'd take a piece of chalk and he'd draw on the chalkboard a coat hook. And then he'd take his coat off and he'd put it up on the hook and it would fall to the ground. And he did this and he ignored that. And he did this every class. He'd draw the coat hook, he'd take his coat off, he'd put it up to the hook and it would fall to the ground. On the last day of class, and he must have done some special preparation on this, he drew the hook, put his coat up, and it stuck. And the class went into applause and cheers on that final day. And then he turned and he said something really important. He said, some of the things that you learned in this class will stick if you're persistent and you persevere. And always remember that. And I think that that story is something that I would wish for each of you in having taken this class. We have a couple of things just in terms of next steps. You've been invited to complete a course evaluation. 9 have responded so far. If 13 more respond, everybody gets a 30-point bonus. So we need 13 people more to respond to the survey. We have an objective that we're held accountable for in SI of achieving a 4.0 or better scores. And I'd be grateful for that. However, more important is to get your recommendations on how this can be a better class next year. Because as I said earlier in a previous lecture, if this class is a product and you're the customers, then for our business to survive, it's really critical that we listen to customers. And it's something that I intentionally do each class. And thank you for your candor and for your ideas on those evaluations. As I mentioned earlier, the team effort ratings, they're required per the syllabus, and that your grade on the SMT presentation depends on this weighting. I'm going to do something different this year. I'm going to release the take-home final by the end of tomorrow. It's still due the same date, 6 p.m. on Thursday the 23rd, but you've got a lot more time to look at it, and hopefully that'll take off some of the end of semester stress. No extensions or resubmits on the final, so do consider your best work in your response. And as I indicated earlier, it's based on the readings. In particular, it's based on the Phoenix Project book, and you can bring in other readings that are brought to bear to answer the questions on that. If you still feel you need more points, I'll consider past due electives on a case-by-case basis. Send me a note, let's talk about it. And most importantly, celebrate you made it. You made it through probably one of the hardest set of circumstances imaginable, having gone through half a class in person and half a class in crisis mode. So my hat's off to you, and more about that in a minute. And then some final words. It's been a real honor to serve you. I do view this as a servant leadership endeavor. I want to thank you all for attending the class and for being so diligent about your participation as well. This has been a great class for having discussions, and I really value that. I hope you valued each other's comments along the way. Keep in touch, stay connected. Connect to me on LinkedIn if you haven't already done that. And let me know what you do after UM. I'm interested in following your career as it unfolds. So please drop me a line from time to time and let me know. At any time, ask, if I can help, let me know, references or otherwise. And then thinking back to last week's questions about looking at your career as a project, feel free to call and discuss that at every time. At 8:30, we're going to have a virtual happy hour. I've invited both the SMT panel and the mentors to join us. It was kind of short notice for the mentors. Rochelle was kind enough to give me a nudge comment on that. So apologies for not thinking of that earlier, but I did send them an invitation, and hopefully some of them will be able to make that. There's a different Zoom meeting that's set up for that. I'll open that up at about 8:30. But we're ending the class early, so you are free to sign off at this point. And unless there are any final questions or comments, I'll hopefully see you all at 8:30. Grab a drink of your choice out of your supply and bring it to the celebration, and bring a hat. So I've got one of my NetHope hats. So I'm going to be wearing this hat for the celebration, so that I can literally tip my hat in appreciation and honor of all of you having completed this class. Okay, thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll see
Thanks,
you at
Ed. It's been
8:30.
a fun time.
Thanks.